Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Dancing with Damage. I'm Ian, your resident philosopher,
And I'm Abby, your resident author.
and today we look at tackling high school and higher education in general.
And we also have brought some furry friends to hang out with us. They feel very strongly about being here. So hopefully you enjoy their company as much as we do.
Now, I'm not a dog expert, but I'm pretty sure that in dog years, these guys would be high school students or something like that.
They're 3. So I don't actually know the conversion rate. I should, but I don't.
If we assume it's 5 years for every one human year, then these guys would be in like grade
11, because they're almost 4 years old. So I guess every couple months they'd gain a year in human years. So they'd be 17, 18, maybe.
So they're going to be hanging out with us for a bit. And last time we chatted a bit about the Guardian Center for children sort of ages 0 to 18 who were born unlicensed, and they would be having a great time and a great upbringing at the Guardian Centers. And then also we talked about the other stream of children growing up in what we hope is the new direction of the education system in society, which was from sort of 0 to 12, reformatting the curriculum so to focus more on music and physical education and languages as a way to create a bond of love and sacrifice between teachers and students, which will help with damage, and also really enhance the foundational skills of those individuals moving through, so that in high school they can really spread their wings and
Flourish
and bloom
like a flower.
Yeah, they're spreading their wings and they're blooming. So that is the best of both worlds. Because if you spread your wings and fly, well, that's no good.
You could be Hillary Duff.
You could be Hillary Duff, I suppose. So in any event, in the book, we talk a little bit about a wolf.
Yes.
In a river.
Yes.
And the story goes that the wolf mother is teaching her wolf cubs to swim in this still little pond. And they learn how to doggy paddle, just like these guys would learn how to doggy paddle.
They're not good at doggy paddling.
No, they're not really. Luckily, Archie has sort of a buoyant torso, so he tends to just float and
with his little legs.
Yeah, so he kind of just propels himself with his force of will. And I think he wags his little stub of a tail, and that sort of guides him. And Gray, he does just fine. So anyway, the mother wolf is teaching her wolf cubs how to swim in this still little pool beside a raging river. And they're learning to doggy paddle and get out of the pool and get into the pool and all that stuff. It's going great. At one point, one of the pups says to their mom, "Mama wolf."
As they often do.
As we all know, wolves address their mothers. "Mama wolf, why can we not go play in the big river, for we have learned all the skills?" And the mother wolf says, this mother wolf is very old-fashioned. She says, "Be quiet, thou pup." She's really old-fashioned.
Old English.
That's right. She's from ye olde time. And she says, "Quiet, thou pup. That raging river is full of rocks and rapids, and so you really have to master your skills here in the still pool before we try our pause at crossing the big river." And the moral of the story in relation to high school is that we have people or children from the ages of sort of 12 to 18. That's generally high school.
Yes, I think in Canada it's generally 13, 14 to 18.
Okay.
But I mean, maybe there's some overachievers who get in a year early.
Yeah, they did the math wrong and they got in early. So
I just meant skipping a grade.
Oh, yeah. That would be good. So yeah, that sort of age demographic, 13 to 18. And the idea is that now that these children, if through the new education system we're proposing, have really solid foundational skills and excellent synaptic and memory formation in their brains. We do love a good brain, don't we, Abby?
Yes.
Do we have good brains in our dogs here?
It's debatable, but we love them, and that's what counts, right, buddy?
Yeah, you can see they're not the most enlightened animals, but they're pretty fun. So now that we have really built up the foundational skills and the global brain function of the children in our new education system, and then they get to the high school age, it's time to really get them equipped for crossing the river of life. Because as someone who's over the age of 20, who we hope are adult people, life can be like that river, eh, Abby? You can have rocks and rapids.
It can be. I'm actually kind of glad because normally when Ian has examples, there's always something treacherous trying to eat you in the water or the den or the forest.
Mhm.
And normally it's an animal that geographically doesn't make any sense. So I really expected him to say the wolves were trying to cross and then like an anaconda would come out or a crocodile. So I'm kind of impressed it was just rocks and rapids this time. It is geographically feasible.
There you go. No animals were harmed in the making of this metaphor. And so, Abby, I'll throw a curveball at you. So, I think everyone can agree that in adulthood, there are challenges that we want to be prepared for. So, what's something that when you were in high school, maybe you didn't learn that you, looking back, now that you're older, you think, oh, it would have been really nice to learn that subject in high school?
Okay. One thing I wish they focused more on was life skills, like how to do your taxes, money management. I specifically sought out an accounting class, and my teacher was great, but there are still levels that they don't really cover. It was sort of a very basic understanding, but I feel like to give them more credit, teenagers can handle more information than we think they can. They're close to an age where they have to know these skills anyway. And often, 16, 17, 18-year olds, they often have part time jobs. So they probably file tax returns anyway. So skills like that, more in depth, I think would be really helpful. And maybe budgeting. People don't really talk about budgeting, but sitting down and actually forcing people to look at every expense they have to deal with in their life and the money coming in and thinking about things that maybe don't come first to mind, like your car insurance. A lot of teenagers have cars,
Hmm?
but they might forget to factor in their car insurance payment because they're just thinking about basic things like food and clothing and gasoline for their car, stuff like that. What about you?
Those are great examples. Some things I wish that had been instilled in me in high school
Mhm.
are simple home repair stuff. So, my experience now as I have gotten a bit older
Mhm.
is that around a normal household, you've got things like your plumbing and your electrical, even like the stove behind us, the fireplace. There's elements of that I didn't know about. And looking back and the problems that we've addressed, just in a home, probably 90% of them are very basic, and with a little bit of understanding, most people could probably deal with them without having to either ignore the problem
Pay an
or
expert?
pay exorbitant fees for someone to come in and do it. And that's very common in sort of in pop culture today in 2026. There's a lot of jokes about how
I'm so covered in fur.
you are
I look like I rolled around on Archie. Sorry, I am listening. I just felt strongly that this needed to be addressed.
you are a human lint roller.
That would be another good skill. Other things you could use as lint roller. Learn that in school. Or how to find clothing that doesn't attract dog fur. But yeah, home maintenance and repair, I think those are very valuable skills because you can't always have someone come and help you. An example, there are several water systems that we have to be aware of at the resort, and occasionally something happens. And if something's leaking, I need to know how to shut off that water immediately because if I have to wait 3, 4 hours for a plumber to come, I could cause serious water damage or have a much bigger problem than, if I shut the water off immediately. I might not be able to fix the pipe, but at least I can prevent future damage. So, very good skills to have. Excellent point.
Hmm. And I think it's pretty commonly known that the generation that's kind of moving into their first home in 2026, for example, in first world developed countries, really are not the demographic that can fix their own simple problems, like if a toilet is leaking or if you need to replace the fusing of a light bulb or an electrical circuit or something like that. These are important skills. And what we're driving at here is, again, reflecting on what contemporary academia is being taught in high school versus what would be really good for the wolf pups to learn before they hit the river. So Abby's right. The cost of living goes up. It's very important in this day and age for young people to be able to have skills that are going to help them reduce that cost of living. And a good example is understanding tax systems, as I mentioned, understanding home maintenance so you can be self-sufficient in that sense. There's many practical things that aren't being taught. And so what we would like to see, and what we argue about in the book, The Social Blueprint, I guess we don't really argue about it, we argue for it, is 3 sort of distinct branches of learning in high school. And they're divided into parenting skills, household skills, and sort of general life understanding skills.
And presumably this would be on top of the other subjects we mentioned that you would learn, like science and history and continuing music and languages and physical education, all the other good stuff.
Big time. So again, a young person in that age category from 13 to 18, let's say they've got, I don't know, but you were a high school teacher. How many hours a day do you think a young person in that age group has in them to actually give to high school? How much energy? If the teachers are engaging and if the subjects are interesting.
I mean, 5 to 6 generally is sort of what they end up paying attention, because it's usually about 75 minutes of classes, and usually there's 4 of those a day. But then there's generally other things they have to do, like studying beforehand. Usually there's extracurricular activities after school that teenagers engage in. So usually it works out to about 5 or 6 hours a day they spend on things like homework and whatnot, all together in school. So it's not bad. I mean, on some days, maybe it's only 1 hour, depending on how well they slept. It depends on the day.
So let's talk first about parenting skills. You know, that's one of the rocks in the rivers. And this is also the foundation of the idea of damage, is that you don't want unprepared parents to be in charge of raising a child, because it affects the child and it affects society generally. We talked about that. So it would be pretty difficult for a high school student to have a child to test this out. So how would you say, Abby, we could propose that high school students could get a simulation of the responsibilities of a parent without actually having a child normally?
Totally fair. So we sort of went a different route than traditional parenting classes with our answer to this. And life skills, sort of tactile examples, would be having high school students help to teach young students in elementary school, sort of be like a tutor to them in some capacities. Sometimes now in grade 6, they'll be reading buddies to grade 2s. So they spend 20 minutes once a week and they read a story to their buddy. But it could be in a much more involved sense. It could be an entire class or half a day or a certain week a month, depending on how you wanted to go forward, and have them help the teacher in the role of an educator, because an important aspect of being a parent is to educate and teach your child life skills. Because as I have mentioned, and as probably every teacher under the sun will mention, there aren't enough resources currently and enough time to give students one-on-one to teach them an entire subject independently. You cannot currently learn to read or learn to write without outside intervention than the classroom. If you just send your kids to school and the only experience they have reading and writing is in the classroom, they will not gain that skill. They cannot gain that skill. It's not possible. And another really great way that they could get parenting skills and loving skills, because as we have mentioned, being a parent or an adult in our book means you care for others. And the second childhood that is mentioned in our book is those who are retired, ages 75 plus. So high school students could go to retirement homes and just spend time, read, talk to the elderly, maybe some simple, lighter assistance. You know, nothing that a nurse would have to be qualified to do, but they could help with small things, maybe cooking and cleaning for the seniors.
So we talked a bit about bees last episode. Honeybees. I like honeybees. And we're going to use them again, but for a different purpose in this episode. But Abby, you'll recall that we really liked honeybees because not only did they pollinate plants to help a garden grow, but they made delicious honey for the gardener.
Yes.
So this bee is really pulling its weight. And so whenever we wrote or argue for a policy in the book, we try and do the same thing as the bee, sort of to generate 2 positive side effects with each policy. And so we're talking about structuring a curriculum for people, children ages 13 to 18. Let's make a hypothetical. And this is not anywhere in the book. This is just me spitballing. Because a lot of these policies, although we argue for the underlying principles, certainly the actual hands-on logistics would depend on the region and the culture and the area of the world. But for example, let's say on Mondays, like you said, the high school class is brought to an elementary school to help with that day's learning for some one-on-one tutoring for the elementary students.
Mhm.
Because we talked a bit about last time elementary school students mastering certain skills like various languages, 3, 4, 5 languages, being very physically active and proficient in sports and nature, and being competent musicians. Well, those are skills that once you master them, you don't let go of them. It's not like a history course where you learn the dates 1 month, you regurgitate it onto a test, and then it's lost 2 months later. Global brain function skills are imprinted in our brains very, very fully. So when those high school students, even if they're grade 9, 10, 11, doesn't matter, when they go back to the elementary school, they're actually able to tutor in a meaningful way as masters of the subject. Well, this is so beneficial because, as Abby said, now we have some parenting simulation, the difficult task of teaching and instructing a young person with the difficulties that brings. But it also is very beneficial to the school system generally because now we've sort of helped solve the problem of needing a high ratio of teachers to students. And it's beneficial to the young people because they have sort of a big brother, big sister to further the goal of providing loving relationships, which reduces damage overall. So that could be like a Monday.
And not only that, if you practice a skill, it helps you to retain and grow that skill. So for high school students, maybe there's certain basics it could be helpful to, revisit or practice. So the high school students teaching the younger students, it allows them to help train their skills and affirm them. But also teaching somebody else one-on-one is the best way to learn. I've mentioned this before. I'll probably mention it 1,000 more times. But in order to actually meaningfully learn something, for the most part, you need one-on-one attention because everyone is different. We've established very firmly in the curriculum that students have different ways they learn, they have different needs, they have different paces. So it's essentially impossible for everyone to learn at the same rate if one person is teaching 30. It's hard. So having the access to a one-on-one tutor extremely nourishing to the brain, extremely positive, and super beneficial. Extremely beneficial. So, Ian, what's another element of our educational planning and systems to help these high school students better be prepared for the future?
Well, we talked about Monday. Monday seems like a lot of fun. Wouldn't that have kind of been fun in your high school to like go and tutor somebody?
I would have enjoyed that, yeah.
And it's funny, you kind of, Abby, I think you were telling me a bit before that you've seen parenting simulations like the students are given dolls or something like that, and they're supposed to act as parents to the dolls. But I am always brought to mind of medical students.
Mm.
Medical students, when they learn stitching, they always try and do it on the most lifelike thing they can. So medical students will use like the foot of a pig. Don't ask me where the rest of the pig is. I think it's probably the grocery store, if we're honest with ourselves.
This is very dark.
But they'll use a pig's foot because it's so realistic that it actually helps them learn suturing really well.
Mm.
So in the same way, just like a pig's foot, like a pig's foot is like a person, these young people on Monday will be the pig's feet of society. Because the thing is,
I'm with you. I just needed a second.
yeah, probably not. Don't tell the pig's feet we said this, okay? Either category. I think it's an honor to be a pig's foot. So let's talk about Tuesday. Tuesday will be fun. Mondays was great. And I think that doing a subject for an entire day, to me, makes a lot more sense than breaking up. You do half an hour of algebra and then half an hour of chemistry and a half an hour of whatever. To me, you lose like 10 minutes just transitioning between things, and you never really sink your teeth into the pig's feet, which we all want to do naturally. Poor pigs. Abby and I like animals a lot. And part of what we're going to talk about is how to protect animals from the ravages of sort of cruel humans.
The ravishes?
What? Not radishes.
No, ravishes. They're ravish.
Ravages.
I know. It sounded like you were saying ravish.
the
So inappropriate
like the ravished.
to be ravished. It's not good.
Yeah. No, all sorts of protection should be afforded. I meant the ravages. So we do love animals. And anyway, let's talk about Tuesday. So there's 3 categories of skills we want to teach in high school. Parenting skills, we'll talk a little bit more about that. Tuesday, let's say the high school class is brought to the home, like each one has like a senior. Because when you live in a community, there are a number of young people and they're attending a local high school, and there are a number of senior people and they're trying to age in place. They're trying to live in their homes for as long as they can to avoid going to a nursing home or to the hospital, where a lot of the older generation people, sorry, I'm being like fulcrumed into the
beanbag.
into the beanbag chair by our lovely little wolfhound here. His name is Gray. Yes, he is. And we're talking about people with gray hair who need help.
Nice.
Yeah, good segue. Eh? So it would make a lot of sense for one day a week, or however you want to space it, high schoolers to go to their sort of adopted senior, spend the day helping them out. Seniors who are trying to age in place, in my experience, don't actually need a lot of hands-on care unless they're in the category, as you described, Abby, who need a PSW for severe cognitive or physical decline. But most of the time, seniors who are, worried about going to a nursing home but still want to stay in their homes usually mainly need help with things like simple things like groceries and cooking and cleaning, just like you said, Abby, going out to get something because they may not have a license anymore. Just simple things, because seniors are worried about falling over and breaking something and being stranded, in a cupboard of pig's feet or whatever.
Why do we keep going back to the pig's feet? No one wants to talk about that anymore.
Okay, forget about that. Forget about it. All right, Abby, stop bringing it up. I brought it up once, but I think I got away with it. So anyway, wouldn't that be great? And again, just like the honeybee that pollinates flowers and gives honey, it's very beneficial to the seniors to have that service. And we're going to talk about how to actually use that for another greater purpose and benefit later on, but really good for the high school students, because when you talk to a senior, don't you find, Abby, that they want to sort of pass on life lessons that they've learned?
Indeed. And I think one of the core tenets of being a human is, as we've said, social connection. You want to connect with people, you want to be part of a community, you want to have relationships, you want to interact with other people. And one of the best valuable assets senior population has is life experience. You can't teach life experience. And often one of the biggest plights to senior citizens that science is sort of putting red flags up about is the loneliness epidemic, because mental and physical health and cognitive decline are strongly tied to loneliness. So they're saying that, I think it was like 30, I don't quote me on this, I might have the percent wrong, but I think 30% of disease could be eradicated in the senior population if they just had regular interactions with other people, if they weren't lonely anymore. And it's unfortunate that nursing homes are currently sort of the best way to try to prevent that, but they have their own issues unto themselves. So allowing a senior a platform to have a purpose in society. They're retired, but they're not obsolete. They can share their life experience, they can talk, they can joke. The young person has the benefit of helping to care for somebody. The senior still has that autonomy of being able to live in their home and not feel like an invalid. And they can have a really beneficial relationship. I think it's super great.
There's lots of positive benefits, but there's also risks too with this type of autonomy for someone between the ages of 13 and 18. So whenever we talk about these kinds of Monday, Tuesday scheduling in our hypotheticals, we're always assuming that there would be very good oversight by the high school teachers of what was going on, so there was no issues for anybody involved. Because, you hear horror stories about seniors being taken advantage of, having their money taken. And obviously there would be measures in place to prevent such a thing. But I think, and even though seniors in this day and age in 2026 are not given as much respect by younger people as historically, for the last, well, as long as people can remember, but let's say 10,000 years, seniors have always been respected by young people. And it would be nice to reestablish that, which would be a natural consequence of the Tuesday class. It doesn't have to be Tuesday.
No, and also to sort of put maybe a ray of sunshine onto this conversation, I know that as a society with social media and the news, we're very focused on the negative because humans always worry about the worst case scenario.
Mm.
And we sort of hyper focus on the negative, even if it is an abnormality. If 100 people told a story about their experience and one person had a terrible experience and 99 had an amazing experience, I guarantee overall, everyone will be talking about that one bad experience. And the perception would be overall, it was a negative thing because negative topics are kind of sensationalized. And the reason I'm saying this is not to say that negative things don't happen, but I am saying that humanity's not all that bad. It's worth saving. The reason we're doing this is because we see that humanity wants to be better and wants to accomplish more and to fix itself. So I have worked with hundreds of students, maybe thousands of students at this point, a lot of students, and they're not bad. And I can say with certainty, while there are people who would probably try to take advantage of senior citizens and it would be negative, there are definitely a lot of students who would just benefit from this and who would take the responsibility as an honor and who would treat it with the respect it deserves. So I think it is very feasible. And you could also have some kind of a system in place to make sure that you can kind of tell when a student wants to be really responsible. And maybe as a pilot project, just the most responsible students who sort of want to put in the effort would be given the opportunity. But I do think it is feasible. And I don't think the risks are as terrible as we think they might be.
No, two things on that. First, society has sort of become very litigious and sort of so risk adverse to the point of being risk gravitating. And what I mean by that is, in the example of the wolves and this swimming pool and then the river, I find in this day and age in a lot of first world countries, the social convention is don't even let the wolf pups in the pool because you could still technically drown in a little kiddie pool. And that may be true, 0.001% of the time. But the problem is with that philosophy, when the wolf pups get to the river, almost all of them get dashed on the rocks. So you've avoided 0.001 risk in order to incur a 75% risk. So it's actually quite counterintuitive. So I agree with Abby that it's important to take calculated risks in the curriculum and in policy that we know will diminish greater and more substantial risks later on. It's always better to have a controlled environment where learning can happen versus learning on the fly. Like you always want to try a rock wall before you try Everest. But to say, hey, let's not try the rock wall because statistically it's possible to sprain your ankle, just try Everest right away, would also not be logical. And the second thing I want to talk about is, when we conjure the image of a high school student in this day and age, a lot of people think of someone who's going to just phone it in, sort of slacking, maybe wants to do the least work possible, and if left to their own devices wouldn't really engage with the sort of curriculum we're talking about. But you have to remember, every step we talk about in policies is a step in time. And so remember that these students that we're talking about in high school who are going to be experiencing this new curriculum have already gone through the Guardian system. So many potentially problematic students have been filtered into the Guardian Center. So really at-risk children wouldn't be in the public school system to begin with. And then the ones that are in the public school system have passed through the elementary school system. So they have a good discipline at this point and good respect for authority and good love injection in their subconscious. So these are people who actually will be able to, as Abby says, hurdle this high bar that would be set for them in high school. So that's the theory. In the next episode, we're going to talk a little bit about the other two branches of high school.
Yeah.
That will be fun.
That'll be fun. I think you're in for a talk, right? You guys like this. That's why you watch these videos.
Yes. They like them.
You like the topics.
So, Abby, we sort of floated around all these ideas, but anything else you wanted to sort of...
Just quickly to your first point, just because this is a discussion I've had, I still talk to other teachers and I'm still involved in certain professional development, as it were, just to keep my axe sharpened, as it were. Is that the phrase? Is that the...
Should I be worried?
No. No. I'm nonviolent.
Do you have the axe now?
No. Is it in the room? No. But one thing, a stark contrast, even just, 5 years ago versus now, one aspect that I really liked in elementary school and in high school was field trips.
Mhm.
It was sort of a tactile way to experience the world. And I remember I sheltered myself as a kid, shocking. I didn't really do much. I like to stay in my room and just read. So my business class went to New York and Chicago when I was in high school. And that was my first time going anywhere without my parents. It was my first time kind of seeing America. It was my first time kind of, doing things where I had a lot of freedom, relatively speaking, and responsibility, but also I was quite safe because there were a lot of teachers and it was a small group of about 10 people. So it was pretty easy to keep track of us. And to me, that was a very pivotal moment in my education because I was able to undertake some responsibility and some independence in a way I'd never experienced before graduating high school. And then all of a sudden I'm by myself, because I went away to school. I went to Ottawa and I didn't live in Ottawa. So it was sort of my first experience having a taste of what adulthood might be like and what responsibility might be like in a new way. And nowadays, there aren't field trips in high school. They're totally abolished because the risk is just so high. And it's devastating because there are a lot of really good kids who would really benefit from that experience like I did. And they're just not going to be given the opportunity because the smallest subsect of the class, who are the loudest and the most difficult, who wouldn't even be allowed to go on the trip anyway, have made the risk so great. We're so risk adverse that now it's just not an option. When I taught elementary school, it was a hurdle just to go ice skating because there were so many forms you had to fill out and all these precautions that had to be taken and all these rules that had to be in place that it was almost not worth going. And that was kind of a staple in Canada growing up. Elementary school, you always went skating. That was a thing. You used to go weekly. But now it's such a hurdle. And elementary school, I find the best part of it was the field trips, going to do stuff. Sort of, it was exciting, putting learning in a new context. And now they're sort of doing away with that too because of the risk. So I like that you brought that up.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And that's sort of going to be a pattern in the new education system we're proposing. Remember,
Mhm.
Act Zero of the book was understanding damage.
Mhm.
We've graduated from that. We're now in Act One, and it's about changes to the educational system. And we're always going to be trying to propose meaningful subject matter,
Mm.
things that stick with someone after the books are closed, after the test is written, down the road in life. We feel that learning has become pro forma and rather detached from life skills. And we see that students have started to, by consequence, detach from an interest in learning and only taking whatever shortcuts and needed, chat GPT and all this just to get the letter grade and to move on, or not even that because the standards have gotten so low.
Actually, sorry, I read an article today about America and they averaged between all the states 30% of people graduating high school in America today are illiterate. They cannot read and they cannot write. That is how bad it's gotten. And the remaining 70% are somewhere between partially illiterate and literate. But isn't that crazy? Because of the speech to text things and people just pushing people through. I was
Hmm.
reading interviews about these students. Some of them are suing their school boards because the teachers just said, go draw flowers, just go draw pictures.
I mean, they must have some literacy because if they can text, that means they know how to spell words. And if they can read a text, they know how to
It's just voice to
read.
text instead of typing. They use voice to text to read the textbooks and they write essays actually voice to text. And teachers now, because the standards are so low, they've just been passing people. So 30%, according to the news today, was of Americans are graduating illiterate, which is crazy.
A surprising statistic. I did not know that. But on the silver lining of that cloud is that now there are no longer notes being passed in class. Probably as much. So, whatever the stat is,
Mm.
Abby and I think agree on the point that the subject matter should stick with you. And that's why when we talk about music and language and physical education, those are things that you never leave behind.
Mm.
And then when we talk about experiences with a senior or tutoring someone, that is real meat for the soul. That's a meal that the soul can chow down on. I don't know why this soul is so hungry. But, it's not just dry wafers and like saltines. This is some meat and potato stuff, memories and stories and real experiences. Just like Abby's describing going skating or going to America or wherever she was kidnapped off to. These are things that left a mark with her. She's not telling stories about this one science exam she did. So anyway, we've talked a lot about high school, but it's so interesting for us to kind of theory craft about this. And we'd love to hear what you think too about subjects you'd wish you'd focus on more in school, subjects you think could be cut from a curriculum that probably would not have a negative or a disproportionate negative effect. And we're going to talk more about it next episode. So Abby, it was a fun talk. Thanks for doing that with me.
Yeah, we'll talk about it more in the next episode, episode 20.
And thank you for stopping by.
Have a great day.